How are you doing with boundaries? Yes, I said boundaries. Some of us are doing really well. Others are still finding ways to build them. Today, Salem and I are exploring how we build our boundaries, what are some easy steps to do so, and how to stick to them. Tune in for the full scoop.
You're listening to the We Need to Talk podcast, and we are your hosts, Salem Shannon and Megan Beaver.
Two millennial moms, ambitious professionals, an interior designer, and a business executive.
Join us for conversations that unravel all the things that not only hold us together, but sometimes fall apart.
If you're looking to laugh, cry, and be inspired, all while keeping it real,
you're in the right place. Grab your drink. We need to talk.
Salem,
Hello.
welcome to South End Charlotte.
I know, this is so nice.
I know. So you came down here to my work area.
Yes.
So after we record today, we are going to go hit up all the design studios.
Yes, we are.
Yay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very excited.
But today we're actually going to talk about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Think a little bit of how we can build them, where we can break them down, where we're struggling currently in them.
Yeah. Well, and I think I hear it some, I hear on social media, I hear some people talk about boundaries, but I don't think that people are having that conversation enough.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really good thing that we're talking about it.
Yeah, I tend to be the person that people says you have really good boundaries, but honestly it's because I had to work really hard and for a long time to build them.
Right.
And define them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a time really work related where I had none, right? And that is not sustainable for a lifestyle. So
right. Well, and I guess I do have some, but they're not very clear sometimes. So I'm more on the struggle side of the boundaries.
Yeah. So for me, boundaries come from defining what are the most important things for myself every day.
Right.
And if anytime something comes up, or an activity or an event or volunteering, or someone asks you for something, I have to go and weigh myself whether or not it falls in these 1, 2, 3 categories and values of prioritization in life. And if it doesn't, I have to say no.
Okay.
That's kind of how I do it. What an example of that would be is obviously family and parenting is a number one priority for me. But, every year we go to school orientation, there's a table to sign up for PTO. And Matt makes a lot of fun of me because I'm always like, no. Because what happens is that also kind of crosses over into a boundary I have around my personal health, my self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and my career, and how I value it a lot. So I say no to PTO, but I say yes to something like career day because that has a direct impact on my girls in their schools, in their grades.
Right.
And it is a form of it impacts them. They're one of the priorities. I can make that work with the other areas.
Yeah, you're volunteering, you're being involved without a commitment like PTO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Screw the PTO. No offense. Y'all are great. The people that do it are great, but I am not that person.
So you're talking about these categories, what are your categories?
Yeah, I would say obviously family is number one, and our safe space. And when I say safe space, really it's a matter of having this life and space created where we're building each other up or thriving or just supporting each other in a way that's healthy and positive. Because there's a way that could be this could be the best thing for Faye, but is it really the best thing for the family? And so it's really family is number one. And so that is the biggest value. If something's going to impede on our quality time together, because both my husband and I do work, well, it probably isn't going to fit into that category unless it's a family thing that is going to help us in a positive way. Number 2 is probably me, which I guess you could probably put it in front of the family, because if I'm not healthy, my family's not healthy. I drive that a little bit. But it's probably my self like preservation.
Preservation?
Yeah, I would have to say so. Cause I've been, it's been crossed over before, and it's not a good thing, it's not a good thing. And then number 3 is really like, I think my career and purpose, maybe not just my career, but like this purpose of doing something out there that's bigger than me and having an impact on something bigger than me.
Right.
Those are probably my 3 things.
Okay.
If they don't fit in those boxes, I say no.
Okay, so give us like a real quick summary one more time. 1, 2, 3.
Yep. 1, family. 2, self-preservation, me. 3, career or purpose in bigger impact.
Okay.
So I think it might be good for you to kind of think about what are your top 3 things that are so super important.
Right. Well, I think for us, I mean, family is one of them. And you're right, like self-care, self-prioritization, I think that's important. And like I'm trying to think about these priorities in terms, like from a biblical sense. Because I think that's one of the things that I've really been trying to work on is just like my relationship with God. And like in terms of like from a biblical sense, it's always you put God first, and then your husband, and then your children. So like you're thinking about it in that way. So maybe like that 3rd item is probably my relationship with God.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's funny because obviously we're both spiritual people, and I think you have a much more traditional sense of spirituality and religion than I do. Because I think for me, where my spirituality and my relationship with God falls into place is like that self-preservation piece, because I know if I'm not
That's true.
spiritually healthy, that is not a good thing either, right? So I have to prioritize it that way. And so I think that's interesting for people to think about.
Well, and that is interesting even for me to think about. I'm trying to come up with these categories, and if you think about it like that, that makes a ton of sense. Because your relationship with God is personal.
Yeah.
And it's part of self. Well, so if that were the case, if we were saying that our relationship with God is included in ourself and our self-care, what would the 3rd one be, you think?
From an outsider looking in, I would probably say like create like a creative space.
And I thought that too, because just initially
covers it all for you.
Right, because I don't want to say like career, because I'm not necessarily like career driven, but I'm more driven to be creative.
Yeah.
And the fact that right now I can be creative in my career makes it an absolutely wonderful situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like because you've been there in a career that did not necessarily have that creative freedom.
Right.
And you struggled. And
very much so.
Yeah. And so every time you said yes to something, it was kind of just knocking on that boundary for you.
Yeah.
And so I think examples are a good way to kind of like talk about.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's probably it then.
Yeah, and going back to like even the religion piece, because I have tons of examples as to why my boundaries are what they are. But we've been in a situation where my husband walked away, didn't feeling great about a church that we were attending because he was heavily involved in volunteering. But I have always been very strong, and I realize that this sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but I'm very much the person that says no to volunteering at church, no to hosting groups, no to things like that. There's a reason for it, because I mean, just at the end of the day, church is the place for you to go and build your relationship with God, but it's also still a business. And so on the back end of businesses, there's always things that people don't agree with, right?
Right.
And so, and I know you do it, you do volunteer and you're involved in your church, and I know you love it and it's the right thing to do because that's what you feel called to do sometimes, but I also see fatigue sometimes too. And it's just like, it's kind of like building a healthy boundary around what you should say yes to and what you should say no to within your volunteering at church.
Right, absolutely. And yeah, church can be one where it's really hard to create a boundary with church because you feel even more sense of guilt when you say no.
Yeah.
When you say no to the volunteer ask.
Yeah.
You feel like this sense of guilt, like you should always be serving. And I think that's really hard. And I think that's where, not necessarily at my church. I think it's just human nature. That's where we get guilty of like asking the same people to help over and over and over again. And then
Yeah,
we burn those people out.
yeah,
And
that's great.
it's a problem. It is, I think it's a problem, I think, across all churches and just anywhere where you, or even like schools, anywhere where you've got a volunteer staff, like where you depend on volunteers.
Yeah,
It's really hard, to not burn that person out that always shows up
yeah,
or that always says yes.
yeah,
So I think it's just a challenge. And so that's where boundaries come in, because as an individual who's being asked, and in this case, we're talking about volunteering, you have to be able to understand your categories, like you're talking about, and making sure that that yes aligns with those 3 categories.
yeah. I've been told a couple of different ways, but ultimately I've heard in business decisions and everything else, it's kind of like if it's not an immediate yes, like your immediate reaction is like, hell yeah, then it's always a no.
I've heard that too.
And so I don't always do that, but it really does. I try to do that as my first knee-jerk reaction. And I'm a gut person, so typically I know in my gut whether it's good or bad and like whether I should do it or not. And I should follow that immediately all the time. But that's one of the practices I try to build into my boundary setting. And it stinks because sometimes there's other things. So like, for example, let's go through some examples. You're not in the season of life yet, but birthday parties.
I don't know. Just creep it up on me.
It probably is. Both of the girls are in school. You know, their classroom's 20, 25 kids. They play sports. Each of their teams have like 10 to 15 kids on them. So think about all those birthday party invitations. And for us, that it's a hard one, right? Because I mean, you don't want to look like that mom that doesn't participate in anything, but at the same time, you only have so much time in your schedule, and you only have so many, like, first of all, you also only have so much budget for birthday presents.
Correct. That's a
Or cash to give for birthdays because they're getting old enough where it's like kind of a cash thing. We've had to kind of really beef up our boundary around birthday parties, talking about like the family aspect of it. So if they're not like a really, really great friend of the girls, or we're not heavily involved with them, we have to say no. And it sucks. It does suck, because you know, the girls want to go and do all the parties,
of course.
but it's just not feasible. So it's not because we don't like you, it's truly because, as you know, in your own values, and when people are trying to go through decision making or schedule their day or schedule their week with their families, that doesn't always fit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another example for us.
Oh yeah, I can just, yeah, the budget part of the birthdays, like, it's one thing if it's, you know, close and it's, you know, you're just gonna, you know, pop in or what, you know, whatever, it's not like this huge involved event. But the gifts, like, are you really obligated to give a gift? Like, are you? Because I think about myself, if I invite you to a birthday party, you do not have to bring a gift. You don't have to just come if you want to. Like, don't bring a gift. There's no pressure to bring a gift because I hate being pressured to bring a gift.
Yep.
You know, especially if it's not like one of our, like you're saying, like one of our close friends.
Yeah.
No clue.
Well, and yeah, you don't know what it is, and is your $10 item really worth your $10 versus it getting put somewhere or re-gifted later? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
So,
for real. Exactly.
Or donate to the school later. You know, that might be just give it to school. Yeah, you know, one of the things this year we've told the girls, it's kind of like we're not, which we don't love having birthday parties anyway, but starting this year, we're really not going to have as many because they're old enough, and it's like we've got some good experiences planned and.
Just got other stuff going on.
Yeah, and so it's like, you know, we never expect gifts either. One of my kids' love languages is gifts though, and that's a hard one. So, but yeah, birthday parties would be a big boundary for me, when I have to like enforce them.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you're like, I am doing a fantastic job at this boundary setting?
No, because I struggle with boundaries. So I don't know that I would have like a great one. I mean, above all, like when I'm making decisions about extra commitments and things like that, like I always consider what's going to take my time away from Harrison, because I do work and I feel a lot of guilt because of that, because I don't get to spend a lot of time with him.
Mhm.
And, I mean, that's just part of it. That's a personal thing and something that I'm working on, but, so that's what dictates a lot of my decision making. And so I think I'm doing okay there. You know, we don't commit to a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah,
And I think by nature, like I'm just kind of a hermit too. So I just have a tendency to not want to commit to anything because I'd much rather just stay at home.
yeah,
Cause I think that's just my personality, but, so I think there I'm doing okay, but I'm working on saying no to more of the volunteer stuff at church. I'm no longer on church council. I'm not volunteering for that again in the near future.
that's cool.
The only thing that I've really committed to is I'm in charge of a committee that meets quarterly, that's 4 meetings a year. I can handle that.
Yeah,
And those meetings, we've got them arranged to where 3 out of the 4 are before Sunday school, so it's not like it consumes a lot of time.
and you're already there.
And we're already there on Sunday morning, and Harrison is now at the age to where he wants to go to church,
Mhm.
so he enjoys that. And then, other than that, I teach a Sunday school class, and again, we're there anyway, so that it doesn't feel like such a heavy load.
Yeah,
So I'm doing okay there. But otherwise, like I've been trying to work on not taking on a bunch of side jobs that stress me out.
I'm glad.
I'm working on it. Is the best that I can say.
I feel like you always do a pretty good job, and I say this from personal experience with you, and like even like in our communication, sometimes it's like when you get home in the afternoons, you kind of like go into like no man's land, and you're not really on your phone or texting or communicating until Harrison's in bed or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we miss each other sometimes in the evening because I'm already in bed asleep, and you're like, hey, I'm catching up on my text kind of thing, and
Yeah. Megan goes to bed at the same time as Harrison, so
I do, and that's a boundary for me.
that's part of your self-care.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like just because of things that I know, like we talked about in one of our other episodes, like I require 8 hours of sleep or I'm not optimized. Like I am not optimal performance. And when I say performance, I mean just like functioning and living, not even like brain on, work on, hustle on. It is truly just like functioning. So yes, I do need 8 hours of sleep, and if I'm gonna get up at 5 a.m., that means I need to go to bed at 9. So that's one of those things, and Matt and I have to have a conversation constantly because he's more of a late night person. Like he likes to stay up later and watch a TV show, and he also doesn't get up as early as me. So so we constantly have to have a conversation of like, okay, there's a couple nights I'm willing to stay up later and like eat an hour of sleep, but you gotta respect like Sunday nights. So Sunday nights are very protected for a 9 o'clock bedtime, so that my Mondays start right.
Right.
But yeah, and I think it's really kind of going through when you're talking about building boundaries, is kind of recognizing self-awareness where you feel best, operate best, and also like are happiest. Because it's not just necessarily you feel your best, because sometimes you talk about like the extreme dieting and stuff. You're gonna feel amazing on a very specific eating style, but you might not be happy, like your happiest, because you don't get to have the donut every night, right?
Yeah, or you're constantly worried about like the meal prep or the meal planning.
Yeah,
And that's super time consuming.
just breaking into your family time and all that stuff.
And
Yeah,
usually like if you're on like one of those diets, like, I mean, we've both done it. Like, let's just use Whole30 as an example. Like that means on the whole, like probably 3 or 4 nights a week, you're making at least 2 dinners.
yeah.
And so how fun is that?
It's not fun, and you're not your happiest. Like you feel great, but you may not be your happiest. So it is really truly trying to find like, okay,
What's the balance?
yeah, what's the best version of myself, and building your boundaries around that. Which is where the whole family thing comes from, the time comes from. Communication, I mean, like when I leave work, typically I try to ask everybody, hey, are you good? Do you need anything? Like, especially on soccer nights, when I leave for soccer nights, it's like, I'm not going to be available, so here's your time.
Right.
And like, I'm not available unless unless the office is burning down until tomorrow kind of thing.
Right.
So And that's truly so that I can put the girls first. I also typically do my cardio while they're practicing, so it's like me, you know,
It's
just
you're working out during that time.
building that boundaries that people respect it, and I think it also helps them recognize it's okay that they have those too.
Yeah, and so you're really talking about like your work life and the example that you set for your employees.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, I also love to help them identify where their boundaries need to be.
Yeah.
Because I want to be respectful of those. And so some of our conversations very much are, okay, you know, when is not a good time to ask you something? Because we have a flex work schedule. So sometimes I'm here before everybody else, but I need to ask a question. And I don't expect them to answer it, but even just putting it in our work communication chat might be like kind of impeding on their boundaries. So I have to ask them, I'm like, okay, like, where's the best place for me to put this so that you don't see it until you're ready to work?
Right.
You know, and so like, you know, I prioritize and I value a lot for everybody else to also communicate their boundaries, to be respectful of.
And so I know that this in particular, when you're talking about work, has taken you a while to develop.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So kind of walk us through like kind of your journey there, like, you know, what was your work-life balance like before, and like how did you get to this much healthier place?
Yeah, a previous career, I was pretty much on 24/7. Like there was no, it was in fitness, our gym was 24/7, you know. Especially if you were running more than one club, sometimes like even medical emergencies happen in the middle of the night, all kinds of things. So I was really never off. And I think no matter when you're on and off, you have burnout periods, right? And my burnouts were just starting to be more frequent and closer together. Which is when I started realizing, okay, somehow or another, I have to find a way to put some boundaries in place.
Okay.
And those boundaries weren't very hard and they weren't they weren't big acts. And so I started putting small ones in place. Like I'd be like, hey, look, I realize this is a typical schedule, but if one of the girls has something going on, I'm going to attend that because they are more important than my job. So I had to start implementing that, and that worked pretty well. So you know, it was like a minimal attendance of things at school, especially when they got to school, but I prioritized what those were, especially like taking them to school instead of going straight into work.
Right.
School drop off is my thing. It's gonna happen. I value that. That was one of them. School awards days was one of them, you know. And then typically, I mean, it was really hard. Sometimes those boundaries started getting pushed on, and towards my end of my career, when there was a transition in like ownership, that there was an expectation of I shouldn't have boundaries, which is where we ultimately led to a change in work, you know.
Right.
And but it made me realize that very moment after like 12 years there, I was just like, no matter where I end up, I need to go in with boundaries, not go in and then build boundaries.
Right.
And knowing which ones are non-negotiable and which ones are flexible, right? Like they're normally in place, but they might be flexible. Like
right.
Even with work now, sometimes the owner may call me because he operates differently mentally than I do, and I'm like he's cool if I don't answer. I'll text him and be like, I can talk at this time. He's like, it's actually not that important. We'll talk tomorrow. And so he's very respectful of that. And once again, it's finding people who have a mutual respect for those things.
Right.
So yeah, I guess 12 years in the making. And I realize that to other people who haven't gone through that journey yet, it might feel very rigid, because even with our family members, there's some rub, there's some tension. But you know, it's what's best for us, and I think it's the best we've ever been. So as a family unit,
yeah, clearly it's working.
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think for me, I'm lucky because my boss has rigid boundaries.
That's great. So
yeah.
You have boundaries by default.
Yeah.
What's his boundary? Like,
I mean,
some examples.
He stops working at 5.
Oh yeah.
Period. Now, there have been occasions where I needed to tell him something and I text him after hours. He does not respond.
Yeah.
Until like 7 a.m. the next day.
Well, I mean, because I guess it's not burning down, so he doesn't need to, right?
I mean, it's really like we're not doing brain surgery here. You know, like we're not a medical facility. No one is dying. And so he really, and I've been around the construction industry my entire life.
Right.
And so I just had a different perspective of what this what this job would be like. I'm used to coming from a job where I was on way more. And that was, a couple of factors, I wanted to be successful, so I was driven to be more available. Plus the plant I worked at was 24/7. And so I had to go in early or go in at like random times, like at night sometimes, I just wasn't used to somebody saying, no, we stop at 5. And then just being around him and listening to him talk to people, we don't work on Saturdays. Our guys don't work on Saturdays. The only way they work on a Saturday is if one of the guys says, hey, I'd like to get some overtime and there's work to be done.
That's cool.
Otherwise, we don't work on Saturdays, and Gene does not go see people after 5. A lot of people,
Which is super respectful of like a normal family dynamic, because after work hours is when you're trying to do your things together.
right? And he has 3 kids.
Yeah.
And now they're all older, they're all in college or graduated, but it blew my mind when I first started, because he said, oh yeah, we don't work after 5. We don't go see people after 5. We will rarely go see somebody at 4, because if they can't take off work to meet us during the day, they're not our client anyway.
Yeah.
Because you don't go to the dentist after hours. You don't go to the pharmacy after hours. Now you've got Walgreens and stuff. He was just like, all these other professionals, you don't ask them to meet them on a Saturday.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to ask us to meet on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So my mind was completely blown. What? How does this exist? But he has built a business almost 25 years off of these boundaries and principles, and it is clearly working. So I was shocked. So by default, have those boundaries, which is fantastic.
Yeah, but I think that's great, because it's gonna set you up for being able to, I've seen over the past few years, you're starting to be able to say, you're at least defining what you want your boundaries to be moving forward, right?
Right. He makes it easy for me to say, hey, I'm not doing this, or hey, I gotta leave early. Like, he just makes it so easy, because he understands, and he's flexible, and he's fine. And I guess his just mentality towards it is just totally different than what he used to.
Yeah.
Like, it's serious, but he doesn't take it so serious.
Right, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think, it's interesting, because no matter who you are, you have to have boundaries. Somebody's boundaries can be a lot bigger and wider and looser than someone else's boundaries. Like, there could be a very tight box within. And I've even had some employees who their boundaries are a lot tighter and smaller within a box. And the thing is like, nobody should judge or force you to change your boundaries. What happens though is you may be forced to change your environment so that your boundaries work within it.
Right. Yeah. And people will have opinions about your boundaries.
Of course, because everybody is entitled to an opinion. Doesn't mean that it's right.
Or that we have to like it.
Yeah, and I've had a team member actually work for me before, and we're customer service, and she was in the customer service department. But her boundaries were very limited as far as like customer communication and stuff. And it's kind of like, they're a little too limited to what we do, right? Because we're the same way. We don't expect you to kind of communicate after hours, period. Even if, because we're an East Coast company, we don't expect you to communicate on the weekends, period. So they can expect their communication to come back on Mondays. Once again, it's not surgery, unless someone's website goes down. Like, that's not that big of a deal. We can fix that easily without too much communication. But her communication got tighter and tighter, where she didn't want to communicate outside of a certain amount of hours within the workday. And it's like, at some point you have to look at your environment and try to find something that's going to be conducive to that, because that's what she needed. She couldn't handle a whole lot of like customer communication all the time. So it's like, maybe customer service is not where
you need to be.
And that's okay. You gotta find what you thrive in based on what your boundaries are. So
true.
Yeah.
So she had to go and,
Well, she moved, and based on that, we are an in-office stateside company, so she's in the process of still looking for another career, and that's okay, but it was a great conversation, because I was like, you should think about these things when you're applying for jobs, and she has. And I think it's amazing, because she's not settling unless it's something that is good for what she knows her self-boundaries are.
that's good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and we stay in touch all the time, so. Well, I think the biggest thing is like, what does it mean to build some boundaries, right? The first step to that is defining what are your categories of protection. Like, it's
Mhm.
like protect your peace.
Right,
Yeah,
that's an easy one.
yeah. And then it's kind of like, okay, anything that comes your way towards those things, you have to decide if it's not a hell yes, then it's an absolute no. Maybe, or like work through that decision-making process. I'm just trying to think, like, how does someone start this process if they have none?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, like you said, like the first step, I mean, the easy thing is to create your framework for decision making.
Let's go, good.
Like, so that means what are your categories?
Yeah,
Like, what are your little pillars? Like, what are the things that you're making decisions up against?
yeah,
Or what are like those drivers for decision making?
yeah,
And then, yeah, like if it's not an immediate yes, which I mean, I wish I could listen to my gut, because usually it's pretty decent, but I have so much, I don't know, over the years, whatever, I've just developed like a lot of like, I guess, self-doubt, but I overthink stuff. So that makes my gut voice quieter or harder to listen to. And it's because I overthink everything.
I do not.
I know you don't. You're very good.
No, that doesn't mean I'm good. I just don't overthink. And sometimes that's not a good thing, because I do not go do my homework, and I'm just like, this is what I think. No, typically, this is what my gut says. I can't explain it. And they're like, no, you need to explain that. And I'm like, oh.
Honestly, I think it's a scarring from human resources, because I had to like try to think and assess like every single issue that came across my desk, like from so many perspectives. Like, okay, what would happen if it went this way? What would happen if it went that way? What if, what if? And then it just got into like such an ingrained like habit.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been hard to break.
Well, I'm sure you've heard at some point that the only thing worse than a bad decision is no decision.
Yes.
And that's bad, not just for you, but the other side of the decision too, right? It's kind of like if someone's waiting on you and you just keep saying like, I don't know yet, I need to think about this. And it's like, because you're thinking about all these different opportunities, and it's like, just make a decision. Even if it's bad, you'll learn and you'll not do it again.
Correct.
Because once again, we're not surgeons, so a bad
Usually
decision can be recovered.
Yes, most of the time.
And sometimes you learn the hard way and the long way, and then you're like, won't do that again.
It is effective.
Yeah, it's good character building.
But going back to boundaries, and like really we're trying to create this framework for decision making so that we have, some clear set boundaries. Like having those categories or those pillars, like that really helps.
Yeah.
And that could be applied to anything, thinking back to like my overthinking in HR or whatever but we're talking about boundaries for your personal life. Like if you have those sort of like defining categories, it's kind of like a checklist. If things don't check all the boxes, then it's a no.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I don't know how else to encourage people to make sure that they do this other than going through the process first and practicing it. Because I can sit here, people can ask me all day long, well, like, how do you do it? How is it so easy to say no? And I'm like, because it feels good to say no when you're doing the thing that you're meant to be doing in that time that would have been a yes.
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of like, we'll say no to birthday parties or just like random requests that aren't necessarily people that we're like in community or in relationship with outside of just our family unit. And it's and we're like, man, this is what we're talking about, a backyard dinner versus like having to put on a different personality just to go to this invite that we got.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about back to when we were talking about decisions, like a bad decision or, so when you make a decision to say yes to a commitment and you're doing that thing and you feel like shit while you're doing it, you're like, why the F did I say yes to this? Or you're pissed.
You immediately regret it after you do it.
Or while you're doing it.
And then you
While
regret
you're
it.
doing it.
Yeah.
Like then you're like, shit, why did I say yes to this? I experience that often. And I'm trying to learn from that though and say, okay, these are the types of events that I get pissed when I say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not so bad when you initially say yes, but when it actually comes down to doing it, you are livid.
You're not looking forward to it. Yeah.
Those are the things I gotta say no to. And so that's where I'm trying to learn from my bad decisions.
Yeah, I think people need to remember those moments. It's so easy to forget that you felt like that in that moment, but you really need to make a mental note and be like, these are the things that I need to stop committing to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I have a small list of those.
well, field day at school, and it all goes back to a lot of school events for me. Because but the thing is, it's like, I loved career day. I love being like,
I can see you thriving in that.
involved and like getting the kids involved and like really letting them thrive and like be participating. But standing on the line for field day in 80-degree sun weather to watch kids relay race is not my idea. Like I'm so glad one of my kids is going to middle school next year and there's not a field day. And like, I need to figure out my other one because she's like, you need to be in all the things. And I'm like, how to get out of it next year. Maybe I'll send that. Because we alternate.
It's his turn.
Well, we do alternate because we can't go to everything all the time. And but it's just one of those, I hate going. I hate going. I asked a friend yesterday, I'm like, can you bring some champagne in a to-go cup? Because like this is gonna suck. And because that'd make it better. But that's one of
I
the
can see
things.
that making it better.
It's painful, and I need to probably just figure out how to explain to my child that it's not necessary for a parent to be there.
Yeah.
So that's the one. That's the one I'm still struggling with. I've got my boundaries pretty well healthy, but they're not all. I break down sometimes.
Well, I mean, when it's for your kids, it's hard to say no.
Well, and it's a perfect example. It's like it's for my kids, but it's really not like growing us, pulling us closer together, putting them in a positive experience.
They don't
like,
need you there.
from the beginning of the show, it's like it's not checking some of those boxes. So, what do you do?
Yeah. And I think for me, like the ones that I hate the most are the ones where I feel like I wasted my time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because my time is very valuable to me.
Yeah.
And if anything or anyone makes me feel like I've wasted it, I get pissed.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
I get so mad.
Yeah.
This happens to me even at work, even though I'm getting paid to be there. Like, waste my time. I might have a small meltdown. I just spent a week designing your kitchen and you're gonna say no?
Oh, yeah.
So my time mean nothing to you?
Yeah.
Luckily we have a really good process and usually we don't make it there. But like that's just an extreme example.
Yeah.
But like anything that's like a waste of my time, it pushes me right over the edge.
Yeah, I think time is kind of your currency for you.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I don't even know how to define it, but it's probably how you need to make your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Is literally like, if it's not a hell yes for my time, it's an absolute no.
Right. Right. Is it worth my time? And I think, but that goes back to my categories because my time, I'd rather be spending my time with my family. Or I'd rather be spending my time being creative and filling my own cup.
Yeah.
And if the yes takes me too far away from that, or it just feels like a waste completely, like I'm not serving others, there is no benefit, I get so mad.
Well, I think that we have come
It took a dark turn.
No, it's really good point because you saying that made the point, like the sticking point for all of it. Because I love this. It's like, okay, first of all, you need to find your categories. And you need to, through the decision-making process, what is it costing you? And for you, it's time.
Right.
Some people, it might be money. That might be how they build their boundaries. For some people, it might be like, what is the purpose of the event? I think that's probably mine more than anything. A lot of times, it's like, is this really like, making an impact in these areas for me? If not, it should be no, you know? So like, it's defining how you make your decisions, and yours is time. And so I think that's the process, like define your categories, figure out what your decision-making needs to be built on.
Right.
Time, money, you know, impact, purpose. I'm sure there's a lot of other things out there. And then like stick to it.
Mhm.
Like stick to it. Because you'll be happier.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, what are we trying to do here? Just
Be the best version of us, whatever that looks like.
right.
So
Right. Absolutely. And do it while being happy.
yeah,
Because you might as well enjoy what we're doing.
I know. I mean, why not?
I feel like it's so easy, especially like just at this day and time, depending on like what you're looking at on social media or whatever, to get stuck in like a negative loop,
Ooh, yeah.
you know, and the boundaries, I think, just help give you a better life experience.
That is probably why I don't struggle with social media, because I get on there and I'm like, this does not serve a purpose. And then I'm not on it very much.
Well, and I struggle with it. And you would think because I value my time so much that I wouldn't, but I struggle.
And I am very much of the mindset of like that negative loop you just said. Like I'm very much of the mindset, if somebody's trying to put me in a negative loop, I'm like, swipe close, swipe close.
Yeah.
Like, I've got zero time for that. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think social media is just like the poison of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's so addictive.
It really sucks because it could be used for so much good.
Yeah.
Could be used for so many things.
And I think some people are using it for good. So like, don't get me wrong here, but
yeah, but unfortunately it's very saturated with that negative loop feedback like you were talking about.
Well, it's well, and for me, because of my personality, like I fall into the pit of like, let me compare.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a comparison trap for me. And I just get sucked into it.
Yeah.
It's like quicksand. So that's where social media is kind of just like a big like negative thing.
Yeah. Well,
but that's a different conversation.
I think we land with build your boundaries, find your decision maker currency, practice it, and like find a way to get yourself in a constant positive loop.
Yeah.
That's what not the negative loop, but your boundaries are really built to create a positive loop to keep you in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love it.
All right. Great.
That's it. Yay.
Yeah.
Go build your boundaries, guys. Go build them.
Positive loops.
That's right. Until next time.
Until next time.
We hope today's episode gave you some inspiration and something new to try. Until next time, friends, you've got this.